Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news, which very possibly is now going to be known as What's New, comma, with Rydo, which is now the podcast setting. Let me bring it up here. Let's see, here it is. What's New with Rydo. So basically, YouTube is pushing and promoting the idea of turning at least one playlist into a podcast. And I spent a significant amount of Saturday, pretty much all of Saturday, setting this up, writing a new description, which honestly you can't even see all of it on mobile as far as just all the descriptions and all the text. It stops after a certain point, even before it stops describing the segments. I've put down in concrete effectively what's going on instead of just assuming that people will already know, although I doubt too many people will actually read any of this. Anyways, the playlist is sort of a mess at the top. It's kind of organized at the bottom, but it's a mess in the middle too. You can see the most recent live streams that I could find. It seems like a lot of live streams are just getting auto-deleted by YouTube, and YouTube never told me that that was the case. But yeah, we have live streams here going back 6-7 months, and it's mostly in order there. So the newest thing on the playlist would be the newest stream, hopefully automatically added. That's the thought there. But after that, it just goes. The idea is that it would go backwards in time, and I don't know how many people really would want to go back in time and listen to news from a year ago or earlier. I might have some interesting commentary there, but that's about it. You can see here how this went from a year ago, streamed a year ago, to streamed 11 months ago, to streamed a year ago, streamed 11 months ago. It's just not consistent at all in that aspect. The good news here, though, is eventually I put out the recorded versions of these streams and give them a number. But you can also see that the numbers and dates are all out of order. And yeah, YouTube's content creator and playlist setup, just not set up in a way that would be effective. And on top of that, you run into this problem where if you drag something and try to manually sort, it then resets you back to the top. So yeah, it's just going to be a mess. Going forward, it should be alright. And this does make a podcast that has a lot of things to listen to. The weirdness there, certainly, is I don't know where you're going to find podcasts or how YouTube is going to really promote podcasts. I don't go to YouTube's main page, which I guess that would be something to think about. Is just what does even YouTube's main page look like these days? So yeah, I don't know how many people go to the YouTube main page and scroll like this, but you can see they're promoting shorts, and at some point I imagine there will be a vertical banner here that would promote podcasts, but it doesn't really seem like there's too much of that. Maybe far in this whole thing, yeah, here's podcast as a tag, but it really is just kind of treating them as the same thing. But obviously they're interested in moving that forward. uh, and promoting that. And I am, I guess, just a slave to whatever the whims of YouTube are. Like, generally, I really don't think a lot of people go to the main page looking for videos. They're probably searching actual things, searching Google to find actual things. So yeah, there's a new Angry Video Game Nerd video that I need to check out at some point. Don't really need to check it out, but I'd like to check it out. But yeah, I could only assume that eventually podcasts will be a thing. And so, yeah, we are left with that as it is. Speaking of YouTube, which we'll jump into Yu-Gi-Oh! At a point, but even with this podcast, the focus on Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be even less. It's just going to ever increasingly be even less on whatever collectible card game, down to a point where I may find a way to really warm up while not even doing a collectible card game and just give up on playing a collectible card game in total, or a game that has some kind of dailies in it, daily rewards. The new CEO for YouTube, Neil Mohan, put out his 2023 priorities, and if we were to skim here, supporting the success of creators, we hope that's true. I really believe it. Here we have a video being highlighted, first time at a black barber shop, giving creators more ways to make money, listening to creators. These are all nice lip service to give. Growing creator communities, building for the YouTube of the future, viewers experiencing streaming and connected TV experiences, creators unlocking creativity across formats, protecting the YouTube community is a big deal. One of the things I realized is that the DuckDuckGo extension installed into Firefox was causing major problems all of a sudden as far as just trying to upload videos. Although I'm still having problems trying to upload videos on YouTube where the tab is crashing after a few hours. Noticeably here, it seems to me like there's no highlighted focus on NFTs or anything like that, or any real crazy announcement at this point. So yeah, it could very easily and very likely is going to be more of the same. We have a new pack, Strong Will, coming out March 8th. Today is March 6th. Heroic Warriors going away March 8th. Let's see. A Forbidden Limited List update. Really, these updates have only changed 3 or 4 cards, so it doesn't seem like Yu-Gi-Oh! Really is that unbalanced. And then the event 2 rental competition starts March 9th. And then rental competition 3 starts March 30th. So they've basically set up for every week or every other week. Let's just hop into, well, let's go into the shop and open some packs to start with, but that's about that. And then the other thing I did over the weekend is play more Prey. I got several episodes recorded, and yeah, there's not really too much going on there. It is only, I think, a slight spoiler to say that I've hit a point in the main story by kind of focusing in on the main story where there's a lot of opportunity to run around throughout the entire space station a second or third time, and you're going to get more side quests after, well, particularly after you've gone to the cargo bay and the power plant and you start running into humans. They start giving you quests. Humans end up in the cargo bay, humans end up in your office, and they become quest givers, whereas seems like I spent way too much time fighting against or just searching for items and being alone, which does definitely make it seem like the game could be a lot longer than that. I've made the game a lot longer than it really should be. But once you get to a certain point, they take you away from the narrative of you could either escape the space station and leave everybody else to die, or you could blow up the space station and kill everybody and the mimic typhons, the typhons in general. They have now introduced a third option, which definitely potentially recontextualizes some things, because neither of the options were particularly good. A major problem I foresee, and this again is a spoiler for the game, but honestly, if you really enjoy the game, you're gonna want to play it multiple times, and being spoiled on anything really isn't gonna affect too much. But a major plot point seems to be that nobody can actually use the escape pods, that they're broken or were never in working condition or real in the first place. So there's at least 3 different places I've seen where there are escape pods, and people ran towards escape pods and just got killed by mimics and or couldn't escape. The game does throw one decision at you and doesn't really tell you the outcome, so you have to decide whether to blow up a shuttle that left about 30 minutes before they realized the typhoon outbreak happened, so there might be typhon mimics on the space shuttle and there might not be. You just don't know. And as far as I could tell, there was only possibly one way that you could have known, and I wasn't able to pull that off. There is also a submission where it wants you to kill a character, but there is also an achievement for not killing any humans, so you really can't do both of those in the same playthrough. There is also a problem, it feels like, as far as just where you're going to end up as far as killing people, or where I'm specifically going to end up as far as killing people, because I do want to play as the good guy and not kill anybody, but I still accidentally killed 2 people. I found out that the Typhon ability, the Mind Jack ability that frees people from being brain controlled by the Typhons, is exactly the same outcome as using the null wave grenades. So you can just null wave grenade people and not take that ability, which would have definitely saved a lot of hassle in the fact that now I have too much Typhon DNA in me and the turrets are attacking me. Turrets utterly useless unless you've got 3 of them and they're all fortified. They can't take out your average Phantom, which is only like a 2nd tier enemy. There's Mimics as a low tier enemy, and then Telepaths and as a 3rd tier enemy, and or Special Phantoms as a 3rd tier enemy, and then you have Nightmares. Mostly I've just devolved to using the shotgun for everything, except for nightmares and telepaths, which I use the Q-beam for, which is supposed to be like the BFG in Doom, but certainly doesn't feel like the BFG. It's slow and uses a lot of power even at its maximum equipped upgraded status. I bought too many weapon upgrades early in the game, and now I'm finding weapon upgrades that are unnecessary. And so now I'm recycling weapon upgrades for material to get bullets, which bullets are still a major problem. You spend, on a fully upgraded shotgun, you still spend 2 or 3 shots to kill a phantom, and maybe you'll get 1 or 2 shotgun shells back at best. The storyline is still the main problem though with Prey, and I feel like I'm really repeating myself every time I talk about this though, in that the storyline is just incredibly paralleled, in that there are potentially 5 or 6 optional submissions happening, and those 5 or 6 missions happening include 12 plus people, because it's usually one person talking about another person or interacting with another person, and then the vast majority of it is through emails and reading, which is just way too much. One thing I also have noticed about Prey is that there really is just no polish at all as far as a conversation cutscene. They don't stop the announcements that are happening in the background from playing when somebody is talking to you. They don't stop other NPCs from potentially saying something to you. So it's really hard to listen to the to what the person is saying throughout that whole process. So yeah, they also don't disarm the main character or lock the NPC who's talking to you to a specific spot, so they'll walk around a little bit. You'll have like the wrench in your hand and do the idle animation of tapping the wrench in your other hand, like you're going to smack the person in the face while talking to them. It's absolutely far away from something you would see in something like The Witcher 3, where they had a whole separate system for it. And even in The Witcher 3, there was a lot of pop-in as far as textures and visuals when you went into that conversation mode. But like, there definitely needs to be something better done in Prey. And I guess I really question whether there would be a sequel to Prey. Like, at some level, I don't really want a sequel to Prey as much as I would want a similar concept set in an entire environment. Or I don't even want a similar concept. I would like to see Arcane make a new game, certainly, so I don't want to see them just like fail. That much I can say. But it does kind of get into this weird situation where the concept doesn't work, the jump scare mimics don't work. The one main concept that I saw most praised about Prey was the game encouraging you to run around with the wrench and smash every coffee cup because it might be a mimic. I haven't done that in probably 10 hours at this point. It's not worth your time. Let's go ahead and just attack here. But yeah, if you were going to make a sequel, you probably would just have to set it back on Talos 1, kind of like a Bioshock 2, and it would probably play even worse than Bioshock 2 on that aspect. In a funny way, if the mimic abilities had been merged into Control, because that was one of the annoying parts about Control, is that the enemies weren't particularly that varied. And if some of the mimic abilities were also merged into Control, like you probably would have a really, really great game if you took the slightly more interesting story and better presented story by far of Control and gave all the enemies and mimic abilities to Control, some of which do kind of exist. There's very similar experiences there. And in particular, Control really is much closer to a run and gunning game than Prey is, compared to something like Bioshock. You really can't even run past the water and drink water to refill 1 or 2 health as you're fighting. You really can't run and shoot at enemies at a real level. It is much more monotonous, much slower. It wants to feel like it's a horror stealth game, but you really probably aren't going to play it that way. I would kind of encourage early on turning up the sneak ability and stealth ability, and turning up the sneak attacks, because getting 200 or 300% sneak attack damage, particularly early on, is probably going to do a lot more damage than upgrading a specific weapon using neuromods attacks, whether those are scientific weapons or standard weapons. You still would get weapons upgrade kits for each individual weapon, and you'd use those to increase the damage too. I don't think I've ever seen this character before. Let's see what this does. What you really would want is just for System Shock to be remade and be good when that remake ever comes out. And at a certain level, then I think System Shock beats Prey pretty easily. And then I imagine most people will not remember Prey as fondly as it is remembered now. Although you do constantly run into this problem where games come out and they potentially get overhyped by mainstream video game journalists, and then actual gamers maybe play them for a week or two and then forget about them completely. Well, say no to that, and apparently we can't activate that. So I might be in a bad position, and I might have been premature and wrong to activate his ability. Yeah, I totally was wrong to activate Zeus's ability. Had I just read the card, I would have known that. So the question here is... do this. This. Summon this. Activate his ability. Banish that. Can't be banished. Activate this then. Tossing that. Put that there. Activate this. 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and pick this one, I guess. Go ahead and activate this. I often think this spinning animation means something special, but it actually doesn't. Okay, 3,000 plus 3,600 plus that should win, assuming this destroys that. We'll just say no there. And we should be able to win here. But if not, then I guess we're out of options. Like, technically, yes, I should have said yes there. But I'm just trying to save time. Work our way up as fast as possible through the ranked to hopefully get the platinum. But we are at silver at the moment. That was slow. ScumVM has collaborated with Libretro to add the Steam version of Libretro and RetroArch to add ScumVM as a free core. So the Libretro port is now a full-blown citizen of ScumVM. The new code is a complete revamp, and we hope to see it in the next release. And you can also test ScumVM 2.7.0 on Android if you want to. So they've basically, in their minds, elevated the Libretro port of ScumVM into being an official port of ScumVM, which means potentially in Libretro it's going to support some of the shaders and settings being in the same place and being all controlled by RetroArch and Libretro as a interface to ScumVM. I would say the ScumVM, because it's a mouse-based point-and-click adventure game engine for the most part, it does often feel like a odd duckling to be added to the Libretro setup, because most of the core emulators in Libretro are expecting a controller of some sort. That's not 100% always the case. There's definitely, I believe, Commodore 64 games pretty much expect a keyboard too. And if you're playing like a light gun game, you would need probably a mouse input to be the equivalent of that. Oh, I guess I could have possibly activated that and stopped that from happening, but whatever. You also run into a almost catch-22 with ScumVM games, in that they are both pixely, even though there are some new shaders and things that will help it look more higher resolution, but they are also really designed to be closer to your eyes because they were designed for PC screens. So looking at it on a like 10-foot away TV might, in some situations, although I don't know if there are that many situations, have the text be too small. Although probably not, because they were also very low resolution to begin with. So if you're doubling and tripling the number of pixels from like a 640 by 480 resolution image, then the text probably is pretty readable at that point. Let's see if we can pull this off. I think we can. Would I want to go ahead and swap all of these out? I don't think it's really that necessary. Do this. Do this. Do this. Would there have been something I could have done to increase that attack somewhat? I don't know. I don't think so, though. In the turn there. Censored Gaming seems to be getting back on his feet as far as his financial problems and housing problems, and so he's put a video out talking about a retranslation mod available for Fire Emblem Engage, which apparently they're saying in this mod that the line in this example, "I was so delighted eating the dish I made that my face bore a terribly inelegant expression," to, "Well, I ate too much and I gained a little weight." Which, yeah, that kind of does feel like an example of that kind of feels like an example of Nintendo or their subsidiaries having their English translators become ambitious in changing what the meaning was, assuming the after here is actually accurate, and you basically would have to have a very fluent understanding of Japanese to be certain on that, although arguably some of the translators are also not fluent in Japanese, or I've heard at least one Japanese to English translator localizer say they don't even read Japanese, or they don't even speak Japanese, one or the other. Both are pretty bad. I could see not reading it and speaking it, but that really wouldn't work, because you're reading more in video games than you're listening. At a certain level, though, I think it is also fair to assume that a lot of Japanese companies are giving a general English translation themselves to what they want the characters to say. So there are, I think, cases where we blame the English localization team for changing the meaning of things when it's the Japanese giving the direction to do that, although it's hard to prove one way or the other. The other Censored Gaming video, and so he's putting out quite a few, he mentions here that Mugen Souls is coming to the Nintendo Switch Uncut. There was definitely some bathing, like nudity, lewd images in Mugen Souls that were censored out in previous versions, which, if anything, means that the PC version is very possibly not the version to play, if there is a PC version. I'm not even sure there is. I wanted to speak to this as far as Video Games Chronicle puts out this reminder. You only have 3 weeks left to buy digital Wii U and 3DS games. Both eShops will stop selling games later this month. Notably, a lot of Pokemon games are not available to purchase on the Nintendo eShop at the moment, and they're shutting this down. So this literally will become a case where once the Wii U and 3DS games stop being available for purchase, you won't be able to purchase them again, which, yeah, that makes an argument for piracy, but it would be hard and difficult. I imagine Nintendo will announce a lot of the Game Boy old Pokemon games in particular to come to the eShop very slowly, but also there is potentially a case that there is a lot of reason to be a fan of the old 2D Pokemon games and say that they are better than the new 3D games, so they may very well be trying to bury the comparison, which is what I saw a YouTuber do the exact thing, is he made the comparison between old 2D Pokemon games and said, oh, these are much better than the current 3D games. And certainly some of that is probably just nostalgia and opinions, but yeah, it's almost unanimously agreed upon that the new Pokemon games are not particularly quality experiences. I don't know what I want to use my card on. Lego is working on a Super Mario YouTube premiere on March 10th, which would be Mario M-A-R-I or 1-0 Day. Notably, a bunch of retailers are selling games with Mario in them and just Nintendo games for like $20 off. So yeah, it does seem like now would be kind of a good time to buy Nintendo video games with the discount. As far as Mario and Lego, I imagine what's going to happen there is we are going to have announcements for the new Lego things that could be anything. Lego's been really crazy as far as just how many sets they've made and how many things they've announced overall, and yeah, just seems like they're raising the price even more on a lot of sets and just announcing a lot of sets. And yeah, I've got way too much of a backlog. Yeah, I suppose I also am working on my do-it-yourself boondoggle of a sprinkler system. After one season now, I've gone and looked at it, and I've opted to replace pretty much everything as in slowly, piece by piece, if I can. But the main manifold, I just bought a pre-built one to replace it, and I'm going to just use all of the components that I can use as spare parts. But yeah, the amount of sun exposure and weather exposure just being out there in one season was quite a lot. Using metal couplers, often called nipples, seems to have caused them to tarnish green and look rusty after even one season. My hoses are about 10 years old, so it's no surprise that they're bursting and piping. And so I'm buying like better temperature hoses, all rubber hoses, which are really expensive, certainly, and that's going to be an issue. I was going to bury sprinkler heads in the ground and use PEX, and as soon as I tried to dig a hole in the ground, I just completely exhausted myself and hurt myself, hurt my hip, hurt my back, and didn't even get that deep in the ground, and it had just rained, so like the ground was soft. My shovel is probably 15 years old or older, and it's wobbly and potentially going to break at any point too. And I don't have like a trenching shovel, which would probably be the smarter one to use instead of just having a flat square shovel. So what I've opted to do is I found some spikes and I found some adapters to take the in-ground sprinkler heads that I've already purchased and put them on spikes and connect through garden hose thread connectors on the sides and not use the PEX. So now I'll have extra PEX, which I potentially will use a little bit of that, but not a lot. The massive amount of adapters and splitters to go from a garden hose to the original, I want to call them pumps, but really they're valves to turn on 4 different threads of things. Like all of those adapters are probably going to be a waste, and each of those adapters were getting ridiculous at like $10 each. So yeah, there's probably the PEX itself, let's say $30, is going to just sit as extra, and then the adapters I would imagine is somewhere between $50 and $70 of waste. And really, I just learned my lesson by coming at it and trying to do something very different. It just introduced so many problems because of the inconsistency, especially in just how one person's connector did not clearly connect to the next person's connector, and it just created a massive amount of leaks. And hopefully, by sticking everything to orbit and sticking with more plastic / Teflon adapters instead of metal things, that will create a better situation where there are less leaks. It still will end up probably needing to make now, can I do this? Yes, I can. I'll still probably need to buy a couple more adapters, but there's an orbit adapter for the orbit being the brand, manifold that goes to PEX type connectors, and I will just cut off my old hoses at some point, at least that's the plan at the moment, and take the ends of the hoses without the garden hose threads and cramp those ends onto that PEX barbed connector. Hopefully the cramp does not crush the plastic connector. That is a slight concern, but probably not as big a concern as I think it is. Because I just don't think the amount of pressure I'm adding is that much. And like one of the splitters that I was going to use with the PEX is probably a PEX A splitter, 3-way splitter, 1 to 2, whereas I needed a PEX B, and they look exactly the same, but the PEX A's are a little bit wider, and with that extra width, you need a special tool that's like $500 to stretch out the PEX A to make the connectors work. And I thought I could force it, or I thought it was the right thing, and it just didn't work. So yeah, I have a bunch of work to do to fix the things. Going forward, and my current recommendation certainly would be definitely have a pre-built manifold, probably with Orbit, but maybe you could go with Rainbird also, because it's just so much cheaper to get a pre-built manifold and get all the couplers and adapters, or as many of those as you can, built in. Then adapt it by cutting off the ends of garden hoses and using garden hoses on the ground to spike garden heads, sprinkler heads. But I would say you probably are going to have a much better experience, and this is the one good thing I did see in my testing before I gave up, is that a professional grade in-ground sprinkler head does a way better job than a cheap impact sprinkler head that's just going to go click, 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 click. I don't do sound effects, but the cheap ones you get for about $15 are nowhere as good as what they make as far as a spike orbit sprinkler head, which would be the full package and what I would use in the future, certainly, instead of making the adaptation from an in-ground one to turn it to an above-ground one. Almost certainly that is a better move. If it isn't a better move, then, well, that would suck, certainly, and I would go back to the in-ground ones being adapted. It is going to have a fairly ugly sprinkler head sticking out several inches above your ground, but the impact sprinklers are already doing that, so it's not really going to change too much on that. There are also garden hose guides, so you can move it around the perimeter, so you're less likely to have a lawnmower mow over it. Now, the only real thing that I have a slight concern on is it was cheaper to buy two 15-foot garden hoses that I was buying than it would be to buy one 25-foot garden hose. But then you are also creating shorter runs before you have another coupler. So it's just yet another place where a leak could happen. That being said, these garden hoses do come with nice thick rubber washers to use, whereas almost everything else I've seen comes with the exact same super cheap plastic washers. And honestly, I don't know if it's so much the washers that cause the leaks as it is just a badly made hose in the first place, or badly threaded connector. So yeah, I'll get all the components and report back. The manifold, I got a base for it, which you're supposed to bury, and a lid for it, in which goes over the base, in which you're supposed to bury. And I'm not going to bother with any of that. If I'm not burying the hoses underground, which I could, but honestly, there's so many risky places in my yard, and even if I use the edger that I got to trench down 3 inches, there's a lot of places where I'm afraid I'm going to hit an electrical wire that nobody knows about, or a cable wire, and if I was to even trench down 3 inches, then I'm just sticking the spike down 3 inches, which just lowers it a little bit, but would make it look a little bit nicer. one of the problems with the packs I found out is that the packs I bought is probably not the packs that would have stood well to sunlight exposure. So, like they make some that are designed to be in sunlight, and they make, I think, a lot more that are not really concerned about being in direct sunlight, because PEX is mostly done inside walls or inside floors. And you would kind of expect the ones designed to stand up to sunlight would be the ones that are black as far as the PEX tubing. So yeah, the plan is to put the base just on the ground, put the lid on it. That's literally just to protect from sun exposure and prevent, I guess, any animals. I have noticed some animals have gotten very happy to go and lick up the drips of water coming out of my manifold setup. The good news is, as a late edition, as pretty much just like the absolute last thing I would do, is that I can take this manifold and eventually add a hose connector back to the other end of it. They make these little sticks you stick in the ground that have a hose connector on the back, so I could connect it to the spigot in the wall and not even lose the spigot in the wall in the long run. And I'm hoping this second attempt works very well, because I still have the whole front of the house that I would like to wire up and have more sprinkler heads, and I'd like the whole thing to grow as a concept to hit more parts of the grass and water to the amount that's reasonable and necessary. Although I may not really need to add that many more sprinkler heads as much as I may just need to, once installing better sprinkler heads and positioning them better, I may be in a much better position there. There's also an advantage of just not burying anything or having it permanently installed. If this was a brand new house and brand new construction, you definitely would want it buried. But yeah, in any old house, the retrofits can often kill you, and it does give me the possibility in which I could just pull up the whole system and move, which as your house gets older, that is always a tempting thought to move. I wouldn't really want to move locations so much as just move from an old house to a new house. Of course, how do you do that? Seriously. There's never a case when the cost of buying a newer house really outpaces the cost of the benefit of selling an older house. When house prices are up, they generally are all up for everything, and when they're down, they're generally down for everything. So unless you've paid off a house and saved a lot of money on mortgage payments by not having a mortgage payment, that's about the only situation where you could take that extra savings and buy a newer house. Unless you get really lucky and somebody makes you a ridiculous offer. Or you could somehow magically time the market and figure out the exact right time to sell, and then sell while it's high, and then rent an apartment for a short amount of time, and then buy when the housing bubble collapses. Back to video game news, though. I found out some other things about this Pokemon anime. This guy, I believe, is named Captain Pikachu, so he's not Ash Ketchum's Pikachu. Honestly, I think he probably is a Pikachu we've already seen in the anime series. This guy has this like unique magical Pokeball, and they make a special mention of this unique pendant. So I assume this is some kind of rare evolve type stone item, and this is some kind of rare Pokeball. Although most Pokeballs, to my knowledge, are only usable once, so it would make more sense that that the Pokeball has something magical in it than it is just a magical Pokeball. Overall, though, I don't think they're really saying too much. And they just had this whole Pokemon announcement, and yeah, that really creates a situation where you wouldn't expect any more Pokemon announcements to happen as far as games. I think we talked about this. Xbox Series X toaster, Series S toaster as a joke. One thing I've realized about my current toaster, and it's not worth it to replace a toaster that's working. Keep it for 15 to 20 years by all means. But if you have one that is like 2-slice, you need a toaster that has a 1-slice button on it feature. You probably don't need a toaster with computer technology or anything like that. As much as I'm a fan of smart things and Internet of Things, unless you want really, really dry bread in your toaster before you cook it, the only thing you can add technology-wise to a toaster would be a timer to start in the morning before you woke up, and that just seems like a fire hazard and you'd still have to put bread in it before, and it would have to have a sensing ability to know that there was bread in it, and yeah, all of that seems kind of crazy. You could put a smart outlet, I guess, on a toaster and turn it off, and then have a timer turn it on later, but then the bread would be out where ants could get it or insects could get it, and it would just be out in the air drying out. I guess depending on whether or not you use bread box like most people outside of the United States, or whether you put it in the refrigerator like people in the United States, would change your opinions on that somewhat. But even in a bread box, I think you're in a better situation than having bread in a toaster. So yeah, just a good old-fashioned mechanical thing that has a couple buttons that would allow for 1 slice or a bagel size. Like, if you eat bagels, if you don't use bagels, that's it. Readable and adjustable settings and dials are about all you want. Like, arguably a long toaster that could have 2 slices of sandwich bread back to back is better than a 2-slot toaster in almost every case. But gimmicks for like hot dog buns and things like that are kind of unnecessary. Of course, a gimmick being around Series S probably means this is going to be a rebranding of a somewhat garbage toaster in the first place, and it's not like the design of the Series X or the Series S is particularly that iconic. This really is just a meme item that really shouldn't exist. What should exist, though, is a Detective Pikachu 2 movie, which is reportedly closer to reality. A writer and director are said to be in negotiations for the live-action sequel. Probably would certainly come out eventually. A new Nintendo Switch game uses a toilet roll as a controller, which seems to also use a piece of wood to balance the toilet roll. Which, okay. It's a funny little gimmick. I am not 100% certain this would come over to the West. It's also kind of weird that you have this Japanese lady in a Bruce Lee outfit with what looks like nunchucks around her neck. But yeah. Yeah, apparently apparently they're saying some of these games will come to the American and European eShops at a later date, but many will remain exclusive to that region. I don't know if they're talking about general yeah. Yeah, they're just talking generally. You can follow their guide to buy out of region Nintendo Switch eShop games. Alright, this is a lot going on. It's probably going to activate something. Didn't activate anything interesting. Let's see. Probably doesn't matter to summon a second character. Should probably move this guy out because it's pointing at this and it probably shouldn't point at that. Attach that for more damage. So they negated one effect. Okay, that didn't work. Toss this. We'll put it here so it's not pointing. We'll take this. See how many we can dismiss. 1, 2, 3, 4. Summon this. Just banish that, I guess. It's probably the best move. Kill that. Go ahead and just attack that. Yeah, this is moving slowly. I think we probably want to wrap up playing for today after this game. Like, more and more I am going to try to keep this to an hour as far as warm up and just working through the news. Arguably, I should even think about not even doing any news until I make that hardline break from stopping to play discontinuing play of Yu-Gi-Oh! And then just talking about the news in general. But I don't really want to do that because I do want to actually have a little bit of overlap. For instance, like this story here, Australian court says that FIFA packs constitute gambling and orders PlayStation refunds. Which, okay. This is probably a huge story, but it doesn't mean much to me because I don't play FIFA and I don't buy gambling loot box or FIFA packs or whatever they are going to be described as. They're loot boxes, really. So if I was to cover that exclusively, then I would just very quickly move over to the next story, because I'm not that interested. Fortnite is reportedly getting a first-person mode next season. Okay, that somewhat drastically changes how the game is played. It does also kind of feel like it is them trying a different gimmick to just gain and maintain Fortnite's success, which I question if Fortnite hasn't faltered quite a bit by being removed from the iOS store, the Apple store. It more than likely is fairly drastically better to be in first person mode when shooting than third person perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if all the pros all of a sudden do start playing in first person mode and doing a lot better. Oh yeah, the other thing, I'm noticing at least 3 or 4 like slight paper cuts and sores on me from working in the yard on my sprinkler system for just a couple of hours. It is really pathetic, but it does happen, certainly. I should have been wearing gloves when trying to dig, and I don't have any gloves. I'm just not equipped to do these physical tasks because I'm not good at these physical tasks and shouldn't waste money on equipment that I wouldn't use. If only it were a case that buying enough tools made you an auto mechanic and got you an auto mechanic job, that would be great. But that's not how it really works, and I just use auto mechanic as an example. There probably is some career path out there where owning the tools is 99% of everything. I would argue maybe professional photographer or DJ. You can certainly own the equipment for a lot of that, and that is the vast majority of what you need. But you still, to be a truly good DJ or photographer, need actual skill and education. Although taking professional photographs and being a DJ is definitely not as physically demanding as being a sprinkler installer or being a car mechanic. This is a big claim, certainly from Video Games Chronicles, and I saw this from a couple places, and then I think Valve News, Tyler McVickerson, formerly known as Valve News Network, came out and said Counter-Strike 2 is not coming out, but a Source 2 is close to being released. So I've seen 2 sources saying Counter-Strike 2 could be announced, and 1 source that says it's not. At a certain level, I don't know if Tyler McVickerson hasn't really just become somewhat of a jaded contrarian, but he may very well be accurate as a jaded contrarian, because he has been covering Valve's lack of release of games for a very long time. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Source Engine 2 comes out just because they need to shove something out, and it is 10 years too old and 10 years too late as a Source Engine. Yeah, I mean, Source 2 would really have to be an amazing engine that could do a lot more than just making Team Fortress and Counter-Strike games and Half-Life games. It would have to be able to make a wide variety, at least as big of a variety as the Unreal Engine, and very possibly needs to actually be much closer in variety of types of games to the Unity engine. That would be the best situation by far is if Valve, without doing any kind of monopolistic actions or giving any special treatment to people using the Source engine, convinced game developers to use the Source engine as their engine of choice. And certainly if Source Engine 2 is coming out, it does make sense that you would want to put out a game to highlight that. Also, he's doing the exact same thing to me again. He's really playing the same role. Of course, the difference now is this. Don't think I can really summon anything more. So let's just hit that. Well, yeah, it seems like I've lost. Unless this somehow saved the day. Let's see. Probably couldn't even summon Zeus if I wanted to, because I've probably already summoned him. Then that draws a card and sends a card back. Trying really hard. So apparently the source of these claims is an NVIDIA driver, which may mean nothing at all. It may very well just be a honeypot or fake data from NVIDIA or even Valve. So yeah, I wouldn't believe anything at all until Valve announces something, and Valve is not going to announce anything until they are ready to announce something and ready to actually release a game. The one argument I really would make, though, is that we are kind of in a new era with Valve, with Half-Life Alyx, in which it feels like there is an actual desire to make games and release them to some level. If the games are groundbreaking, and arguably just a Source Engine 2 game of any sort should be groundbreaking anyways. Plus, they've also seen the success of Steam Deck, and it does just seem like they either are running out of money and do want to make some more profit, or they have uh, or they have done something. Yeah, I just summoned something stupidly that will let him win. So yeah, I would like to see more steps solidifying the idea that this is a new Valve. Why is it a new Valve though? I have no idea. It seems like it's the same people, same shareholders, same secret cabal of upper managers who don't really admit they're upper managers who are making decisions. Unless they just all got a turn of heart, it really does feel like the way Valve is being run is the same. Maybe there was something in the COVID pandemic that created a rethinking of how the business was done overall. I mean, who knows? But it would almost have to be like there was some kind of major internal coup that happened. And very possibly Gabe Newell is not involved at all, since he really is just a figurehead. Or maybe he's the person that's no longer in power, or maybe he's the person that is in power. Gabe Newell is old, so I could see him wanting to potentially just have another couple of games released before he has to announce a retirement. Like the ultimate thing you would kind of want to hear as a nice way of Gabe Newell announcing that he's retiring is, hey, we've made Half-Life 3 and it's ready and it's released now. I actually did it. I can now retire and people won't harass me. Although, yeah. Honestly, even Half-Life 3 doesn't have to be Half-Life 3 at this point. They could just reboot Half-Life in an alternate timeline, which is what Half-Life Alyx seemed like it was implying was going to happen. Let's see. Moving on. Video Games Chronicles says Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's next 7-star Terra raid features Dueli. I don't know how you'd decide Dueli. It's the first chance for players to catch this one in the game. This is, I guess, a Pokemon from the anime. Is that really where the new Pokemon are coming from now? Is from the cartoon series? Or is this a brand new Pokemon nobody ever even heard about before? It's not part of the game's Paldea Pokedex. Okay, so maybe it was in a previous game, I would guess. But honestly, I can barely name the original 150 Pokemon, and looks fine, but this guy has somehow added 11 spell counters onto it to spell summon things. I don't even know if this really is video game news. It's tentative video game news. Dr. Disrespect is excited for 100,000k blockchain items in games. The streamer who created a video game that calls NFT critics brain dead. I think I'd leave it at that. Yeah. Night. I think probably Dr. Disrespect is trolling somewhat there, but you never really know. I think this is very possibly a case where somebody is taking his jokes and memeing responses, which I assume is what he's actually doing, having not actually watched him. And I think they're taking it too seriously when he's not really, I think, the type of person you should take that serious. Alright. So as far as daily missions, I would have needed to activate a trap card. And we don't have a duel live. Then lifetime missions. Slowly moving up. Banish a few more cards, we'll get another 50 gems. And increase our duelist level. Destroy opponent's monsters on the field. Special summon monsters from the graveyard. Yep. It may be years, it may be never. by the time we got all of these. Like getting the diamond rank is one that very easily is going to be too difficult. Right, so that puts us basically done. We're at 4,000 now, so when this one ends in 2 days, we'll be set up for that. And yep, seems like we're just not going to get any more anniversary packs ever. When you look at Dr. Disrespect, though, I mean, you kind of know he's a not serious character. He's a cartoon character, as it were. Turn on my blur there. Like, this is a fake, like, curly hair mullet wig and a ridiculous mustache, which I imagine is real. And you have this kind of ridiculous get up. But I do also have to applaud him for catching my attention as a Twitch streamer or streamer in general, in that he is such a cartoon character that I recognize the name, which is silly, Dr. Disrespect, and I recognize the look. Whereas other streamers I could actually name are very limited. I could probably name like Captain Sparkles, Jacksepticeye, PewDiePie, and that would be about the only streamers as far as video games that I could actually name. Even some of the like big Twitch thought streamers, I wouldn't be able to name them. I could probably generally see their picture and go, oh, that looks like one of those streamers, like Amaranth, I think is her name, but that's about it. I probably get the name wrong. This does remind me, though, that in having to write up all of the podcast description, first of all, I put it in a grammar free grammar checker and tried to improve the grammar a lot, which is nice. So yeah, I should have done that in the first place, because sometimes I use the wrong words or say it in an awkward way, particularly when typing. It really exhausts me to type things and write things down. It's ridiculous how much of public education is about writing things down. It just assumes everybody is in that mental mindset and that is their best way of communicating, when it totally isn't. Like, a lot of people are more verbal than writing things down, or pictorial than using words. It is nice. So societies or subcultures should have a consistent language, yes, and everybody should be able to read and write, but it isn't the default way. And even when you get into jobs, like writing emails and writing up responses and projects is not the best system for a lot of people. Now, almost certainly that is why you have such an increased amount of people who are either diagnosing themselves with dyslexia or actually being diagnosed with a doctor with dyslexia, is because there's just been this over assumption that everybody is a reader or a writer. And I do read that quite a bit online, but I also skim the vast majority of everything I do read. Anyways, but as I was writing up all of that, it gave me an opportunity to just check my social links. Like, my Patreon is actually up and running, where I really suspected that wouldn't have been the case. My Tumblr account is still working, which I had mostly abandoned that. My Twitch account, not really working. I tried to install an extension that would show my Twitter feed from Twitch, but it didn't seem like that really worked. I have like 76 people following me on Twitch, but I've never found or seen a way in which Twitch felt like it would make sense for me. The vast amount of streaming you have to do to be monetized on Twitch was always just a major deal breaker for me. But I would like it to be a backup where videos are being uploaded. There is a website that I don't link to called Caffeine, which is very possibly I think it was like a blockchain type based video website. It might be more of the more right wing type streaming sites, trying to be a competitor to YouTube, and at some point maybe Caffeine would actually be a competitor to YouTube, and that does work, but I don't promote it, and that is about the only place where my videos are getting backed up. Unfortunately, I need to get my computers working and get local backups of my videos, and that would just be a nightmare on YouTube in general to do. But yeah, my Facebook page works, my YouTube page works. I don't know as far as the podcast aspect if they're going to make an easy way to get an RSS feed specifically for a playlist. So at some point I might spend some extra time and figure out if that's the case. I am kind of still in a holding pattern. YouTube forced me to turn a playlist into a podcast for YouTube, and now I'm in a holding pattern to see if they're going to try to promote that through like RSS feeds or through something else. But yeah, I do have an RSS feed for all the videos that come out on my channel, and that is in the description. But it will, if the podcast specifically starts to be very popular, I'll probably change the descriptions on all future videos to promote the podcast and more things. I still don't really feel like this is a podcast to me personally. I just personally don't listen to a lot of podcasts where it's only one person talking about a subject. I assume a podcast to usually have 3 or 4 people on it talking to each other, or at least 2 people on it talking. Plus, this is just like a highly visual podcast in the first place, so it's like when I start talking about games that came out on Steam, like I can't really do a lot of description there. I could, but it would just take forever, I guess. We have Who89 saying, "Keep up the good work, bro. Thank you for the encouragement, Who89." So yeah, all the descriptions, I put Tumblr back into the default description for new uploads. Tumblr is there really just to support people that like Tumblr, in the same way that Facebook is there to support people who like Facebook. If there was major demand as I became more popular to be on other sites, I'd probably, if I can automate it, be on the other sites too. You get into weird situations with like Mastodon and promoting things on that, because that is just not really a service that people can just click a subscribe button to easily and follow. Same is true for like the Discord server that I set up and don't do anything with. It's just not a system that I think has become popular enough to justify it, or it's not something where people can easily follow you. I would like new services to better promote myself, but mostly all the new services counteract any progress you make on YouTube in itself, which I am now making pretty good progress on subscriptions and subscribers. But yeah, if somebody follows me on Facebook and then they don't subscribe to me with their YouTube account, that doesn't help me on YouTube much. It doesn't help me at all on YouTube. Let's see, this is the same article duplicated. Yep. Moving on, we have 3 more Video Game Chronicles articles. Not a lot of news this early morning on Monday. US retailers sales sees Mario games at $20 off. Sale includes Mario Kart 8, Super Mario Odyssey, and Super Mario 3D World. I would not recommend Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. I felt like that was a pretty bad game. Mario Party is going to severely depend on whether you want to play Mario, but if I hadn't just blown the budget to fix my sprinklers system, I would probably be buying Luigi's Mansion 3 and this game. I don't think I own this game. I'm fairly certain I don't own this game, but I do want to own it at some point. Yoshi's Crafted World, Super Mario Maker 2 would also be fun. Now, noticeably, there isn't even a game here being promoted. Now, interesting on this case too, I'm not sure Mario shows up in this game or this game, and he may not show up in that game either. So they're not all Mario games, but you have a definite lineup here of fairly old games that don't need to be $20 off, and yet they are, which potentially could create a fear that we're at the end of the Switch games. Your only real concern, though, is if there was no backward compatibility when they came out with something that was like a Switch 2, and you had to potentially rebuy games, which I don't think that would fly. Or that they just don't even resell the games. And even either one of those scenarios is really not that big of a deal as long as there are Switches out there to play these games. These games are not going to be better on a Switch 2 anyways. They're as good as they get. So now is definitely a good time. It is also definitely a smart time to buy video games now. Unfortunately, most parents cannot get away with telling a kid, I'm going to buy this video game for you for now, but it's for your Christmas gift, so don't expect any gifts around Christmas. Kids either would believe you, and then the threat of Santa not bringing any presents goes away, which that is a real threat that parents use quite a bit, or they're not going to believe you and they're going to forget about it and expect more games overall. So if you are just trying to save money on Christmas shopping, buying things now is not going to help you so much. But if you just are assuming that you're buying new video games all the time for yourself or for your kids, buying things in March is probably a good time anyways. And fairly certain these games wouldn't be really what you should be buying around Christmas anyways, because they're fairly old. The Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime on Netflix has been given the Anime of the Year by Crunchyroll. Your mileage will drastically vary as far as whether you like or dislike Crunchyroll. A lot of people on surface level, I think, like Crunchyroll, and then the anime purists who have been watching anime since the 70s or 80s have just seen some of the worse problems with Crunchyroll and the inside baseball problems with Crunchyroll and don't really like it. I severely, as somebody who was an old anime fan, and I guess I'm watching Naruto at this point, so I'm kind of back to watching old anime. I question why Cyberpunk Edge Runners would be given an Anime of the Year by Crunchyroll. Like, what were the other competitors that they were willing to consider? Because I know Crunchyroll kind of doesn't consider everything. Not safe for work trailer, can't play that. Oh, I did figure out the problem here too, as far as Video Game Chronicles videos not playing. I have Privacy Badger as like a second ad blocker on top of Firefox's built-in ad blocker and uBlock Origin, so really it's a third one. And then I also had DuckDuckGo as a privacy blocker. I mean, really, you are just going with as many protections as possible. But yeah, something about Privacy Badger was blocking these videos, so I had to enable that. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely won't play that one. 222 replies, and here you have a tweet. So it does seem like embedded tweets are working again from Twitter. The problem, I feel though, is that in an award show held in Tokyo, let's see if we can click that and get more information. Yeah. Like, if you probably can't fairly compare Edge Runners to something like Ghost in the Shell, because Edge Runners is newer, and if you're giving an Anime of the Year award, you can't give it to something that came out many, many years ago. But doing that comparison, you almost certainly are doing a disservice to Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which is just not as intelligent or well thought through or well created of a series. Although Edge Runners, in fairness, also was a long running series where the Ghost in the Shell movie in particular is only 2 hours. But I would say that you see a slightly different animation style in each of these games. I mean, each of these animes. And with Edge Runners being probably not that well animated. Best original anime they're giving to Light Cross Recoil. Best character design they're giving to Demon Slayer. I think the Kamitsu by Chronicles. Best animation they're giving to Demon Slayer. Best new series they're giving to Spy Family. Best continuing series they're giving to One Piece, which, if anything, this would probably be the category every year as far as best continuing series. Best opening sequence, Attack on Titan. Best ending sequence, Spy Family. Best musical score, or score overall, I wonder if musical score and score are different, is Attack on Titan. Best film is Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't even know what that is. Best anime song is Attack on Titan. Best director is Demon Slayer. Best main character is Attack on Titan. Best supporting character and the must protect at all costs character going to Spy Family. Best action is Demon Slayer. Best comedy is Spy Family, and best drama is Attack on Titan. Best fantasy is Demon Slayer. Best romance is Kaguya-sama Love is War. Did that come out this year? Best voice acting performance Japanese is Attack on Titan. Best voice acting performance in English is Cyberpunk. Best VA performance Castilian, interesting, for Jujutsu Kaisen. Best VA French is Ranking of Kings. Now, what occurs to me too is we're covering this for a stupid reason, because they're saying that Cyberpunk Edge Runners is really based on a video game, when in reality Cyberpunk Edge Runners is based on a board game, and the Cyberpunk 2077 video game is also just based on the same board game, but they're divergent paths. They maybe, I think, have announced, I don't even know if they've released it yet, Edge Runners DLC for Cyberpunk 2077, but yeah, this really is not based on a video game to my understanding. Best voice acting Spanish goes to someone, like, the names are down here. Best voice acting Italian, best voice acting Portuguese, This really highlights just how much voice acting happens and retranslation happens for anime, and how popular anime in general has become, that you can have enough people to get an award for this. Noticeably though, Hunter x Hunter shows up, which looks very much more like a kid's anime, very cartoony compared to the much more detailed, much bloodier, violent type focus of even Spy X Family here. Lady with the knife and guy with the gun. A lot more action poses. This ranking of kings, arguably, I would potentially say doesn't even look like an anime to me. So it's very possible that in Arabic countries that would be watching something like anime, they're watching the most censored, most tamed down, most kid-friendly versions of that. Alright. See, I just don't know if it would be worth it to look at the past winners anyways. So, mostly, they're not even going to load pictures here. Mostly this seems like this is a case where they wanted to give an award to Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and they found a couple places where they could do it, but the vast majority of people are, at least on Crunchyroll, based on the awards, assuming this is fans voting on it and not just Crunchyroll giving awards out. Crunchyroll, I believe, owned by Sony, too, so there is potentially a conflict of interest there. But yeah, it seems like most people are still just into Attack on Titan and Demon Slayer like they were last year. And then Jujutsu Kaisen also last year. Must have been a sequel to a movie. If anything, looking at the awards for last year, it mostly seems like it's the exact same thing as this year, and maybe that has a lot to do with the, let's see what Crunchyroll looks like when I just click on the main page. I don't actually go to Crunchyroll, I use Crunchyroll. Let's see, I just don't want it to throw me into some kind of hentai type adult anime on the front page, but yeah, I probably wouldn't have done that anyways. Yeah, they definitely are trying to make anime that is mostly kid friendly. Street Fighter Duel being sold as a video game, so Crunchyroll really is somewhat promoting video games too. I believe Crunchyroll was also the company that bought out the rightstuff.com and then immediately split off the adult content that was being sold from the rightstuff.com. Yep, a lot of people I think do use Crunchyroll, and a lot of people I think don't. A lot of people, you have more options than ever to stream anime in different places. Here's Danganronpa series based on a video game too. One of my personal favorites, the Case Closed series. They're fun little episodic murder mysteries. Not really the biggest variety of games being highlighted here. They're mostly showing you either series that were big hits in the past. This is probably the Fruits Basket's remake, or things that came out in the last 5 years or so. or have some relevancy. You're definitely not seeing a lot of garbage. Yep, they do have this whole Crunchyroll store. But yeah, there definitely was a bunch of 80s garbage that you wouldn't want on your front page as far as anime. Alright. Well, that was kind of pointless to talk about. But yeah, Cyberpunk Edge Runner's not really based on a video game. Animes based on video games do exist, but aren't particularly news that I want to cover because I'm not going to spend the extra commitment. It really is a time commitment issue more than anything. If I was to play Danganronpa, immediately I play Danganronpa for like 200 hours. Do I then want to spend potentially another dozen hours watching the Danganronpa anime series, which will just constantly remind me that I could have saved some time by just watching the anime series in the first place? Like, that's not where I want to spend my time. I'm constantly short on time anyways. Maybe one day if I could just plug in a USB hard drive into my brain and then experience all of an anime series in a very quick amount of time, I would do that. But mostly I'm limiting myself to watching things on Netflix or Hulu when I just don't want to watch anything else on Netflix or Hulu. And usually it is incredibly boring stuff in the case of Naruto, where I get maybe 2 episodes in at most, and then I'm distracted and fall asleep, or I watch it at an extremely distracted rate and don't even remember what I saw. Our last Video Games Chronicle article for today says fewer people are playing Kerbal Space Program 2 than the original game. The game was released to much fan criticism due to several technical issues. One technical issue I definitely heard about was somebody couldn't even launch the game. It's worth pointing out that here you can see the numbers for when they took their screenshot. There's a higher all-time peak of Kerbal Space Program 2. I don't know when that happened per se. It's worth pointing out that the company that took over Kerbal Space Program fired all of its programmers, and so this is what you get when you lay off all their programmers and try to just remake the game and reset the game, which at a certain level, yes, maybe the programmers weren't the best in Kerbal Space Program 1, but it worked, whereas this game is being released and it doesn't work, and the price is much higher, plus time has just passed, and so it is just a different situation and a higher expectation overall as far as what a Kerbal Space Program 2 should be. It should be more of a finished thing. Can we get to SteamDB? And then can we get to the store from there? There we go. That was a double click awkward way to do that. But yeah. Now it is nice to not have to have anybody come out and say, well, the reason why people are negatively reviewing this game and giving it a mixed review of about 50% positivity is because they've added female Kerbal characters. That nobody is coming out and saying, oh, this is just video gamers being sexist again. I'm sure some idiot out there is trying to make that argument, but it hasn't gotten any press. I hope that's the future going forward as far as all mainstream video game journalism. And noticeably, I think it's just so blatantly obvious that the real problems with this game are bugginess. Had they not fired their original staff and irritated, I guess, mainstream video game journalists at that point, there might have been somebody who tried to defend it that way, but I'm just glad that's not the case. This is technically still early access, but it's too early access for people who have been trained to expect a finished game in early access. The Legal Eagle YouTuber made an interesting comment where he said, whenever a low-level new lawyer gets an email from the bosses, the partners, where they say, just send me a draft, what the bosses and the partners mean is they want a fully finished, totally spell-checked and grammar-checked, totally accurate draft that isn't really a draft. And then they're still going to come back with a whole bunch of red lines through it telling you to fix this, fix that, fix this. That is exactly the situation we are with early access. When you put out a game on Steam, you only get one bite at the apple as far as your first impression, whether you label it early access or not. You may get maybe 2 to 5% of a grace period by labeling your game early access, but that's about it at this point. And that's probably a good thing, because the whole idea of early access was a dumb idea. It really shouldn't be a thing. I could easily see an argument for Valve saying, is your game in early access? And if you check that box, they say, nope, don't release your game. Yet, we don't want early access games on our storefront. And arguably, I don't know if there really are too many early access games being released on, say, the Epic Games Store or any of the other game stores. So really it is Steam that has the biggest problems with early access over anybody else. But yeah, it's not surprising, certainly, that people aren't playing a game they literally cannot play. Here's the Gamatsu article. Now, we only have about 10 Gamatsu articles today at all, talking about the Square Enix president to be replaced by a lower employee who's working his way up. What's interesting here is they're giving the number of shares he owns on top of his current job title. He's currently director of Square Enix Holdings Co. Incumbent is when he got that job. He's pretty much been upgraded by being an incumbent every time. So the person above them has retired or been fired, and he's just moving up and up and up, which may be very much the standard way of getting promotions in Japan. If you do get promotions, it seems to me, from an outsider foreigner looking in, that the culture of placing blame may finally have just rolled uphill enough to blame president of Square Enix as far as the failures. And maybe with a new president in charge, a new culture would slowly be instilled in the Japanese company to change how they do business. But it is really a case, it feels like, where Square Enix puts too much money into Final Fantasy developers, directors, too much of a focus on all of that, and then there's too little of focus on other, like, moonshot projects that could be the next series other than Final Fantasy to happen. And then there's just also too high of expectations overall. So when something does not sell billions of copies, just unreasonable amounts of copies. They throw the baby out with the bathwater in the case of like IO Interactive and Crystal Dynamics, and then they've lost significant talent by doing that. Yeah. Even as a person who is kind of a high proponent of firing people and moving them on to better positions, I don't think you fire entire teams for the most part when you have a company, because at a certain level, if you build up the team internally, if that's your business partner, if that's the subsidiary you built and you built it up and it's that big of a mess, firing them doesn't fix the problem there. You need to either fix the team or build up a new team, and it's not like Square Enix has just extra teams to spare. Moving on, the Cry Machina opening movie and 1 minute of gameplay battle is available as far as Cry Machina. Let's look at the battle gameplay. This is in the middle here, blurred a little bit. So this is a JRPG looking game, action JRPG with battle suits, hack and slash, a lot of visual stuff happening all over the place. Now arguably this might be very generic and repeated backgrounds, arenas where you're fighting people. In a lot of ways, as a foreigner, turning a lot of turn-based JRPGs like Final Fantasy into something that's a lot more flashy and a lot more fast-paced would be nice, but that comes with the assumption that then there would be less grind and less people to fight, and I'm not sure that really would be the case. Like, there probably should be some easy mods for a lot of grindy RPG games out there. Yoshi P. So that was the entirety, I guess, of that. Talked about how in the past JRPG has been taken by Japanese people as potentially being an insult, and while I don't personally think I would stop using the phrase JRPG, it does certainly start to push me into the direction of heeding that thought. The truth is, when I say JRPG, I think it's probably going to be somewhat fantasy based or sci-fi. It's going to be a much more interesting setting than something like Skyrim, and it's not going to have the hyper realistic attempt at animation like Skyrim does. But arguably, as far as RPGs in the West, Skyrim is about the only RPG game I can even name that is of any real quality. Sure, you could probably get into the weeds and say that the Fallout series also is an RPG series, or Mass Effect is an RPG series, but so many of these games in the West are action games or shooters first. Even Fallout 3 is kind of a great example of that, where they add the shooting elements first, or as a primary thought, and then they add RPG elements secondarily, and there's almost 60, I would say, to 80% of all games have some sort of RPG elements in them, but I wouldn't inherently call them an RPG. There is something about the Japanese animation style that I'm thinking about when I say JRPG, and that is very much a wide gambit that almost means nothing, because yes, something like Dragon Quest is a JRPG, but so is Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 15. where that is more of a hyper-realistic thing. If anything, I think there might be an argument to be made that visually, at least, the Final Fantasy series of late aren't very JRPG-like. But yeah, we could potentially drop the JRPG and just call them RPGs. But then the problem here is you have other characterizers like action RPGs, ARPGs, and Chinese RPGs. And Chinese RPGs made from China almost universally garbage and definitely have either a Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Story of the Monkey King type feel to them. They feel very Japanese, very Chinese, in the same way that JRPGs feel very Japanese. So yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't think he's offering a good solution there, because he's asking us to remove detail in the description without giving it back in any way. If Yoshida, aka Yoshi P, if he came out and said, my game is a fantasy RPG, so I'd like it to be Final Fantasy 16 is a fantasy RPG, okay, that specific game I could see described as a fantasy RPG, but that's about it. There is potentially an argument that it should be in RPG for Nippon instead of Japan, but whatever. But yeah, I don't see the gaming community getting rid of the phrase JRPG. Not until either there's a lot more RPGs from a lot more countries for it to fall under the general category. And at a certain level, yeah, if Japanese people made a first-person shooter and it felt very Japanese, which there have been a couple of those, we mentioned that those are Japanese looking games or Japanese inspired games too. We don't put the J in front of it because it's not that common, but to not mention the culture of origin or the culture that is being targeted when a game is made is just removing details for no reason. It does dangerously smack of just censorship at a certain point where we're going to get social and societal pressures to not mention that a game is from specific countries or for specific audiences or from specific audiences. For instance, here in this Komatsu article, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Stars Battle Royale DLC character Kicho Nijimura being announced. If all of a sudden there was social pressure here for me to not say that this is a Japanese game, Japanese fighting game, targeting mostly Japanese fans, or there's societal pressure to not mention that this guy is presenting as male, or that I can't use the phrase guy even, that seems like just language policing, really. Yeah. And that's not informative, and that doesn't help me personally present more information if that were the case. But yeah, it's always worthwhile to listen to other people's opinions, even if you're not going to heed them or agree with them. For the most part, some people's opinions are always absolute garbage and not worth listening to, but give everybody at least a single chance. Moving on, Gamatsu says a game called Lunark launches March 30th. Limited Run Games is going to produce a physical edition. Since it really is kind of unfair, but since we don't have that much news today, it does behoove me to look at this game a little bit more. Seems like they're very influenced by movies, which them showing clips of movies potentially gets me copyright claimed. It's always the danger there. Moonarch kind of feels like that game Another World or Flashback. There was a sequel to Flashback I heard about, and I'm going to have to figure out what the name of it is and see if it's on Steam. Moving on, Gamatsu says Akiba's Trip, Undead and Undressed Director's Cut launches this summer in the West. Limited physical editions have been announced for North America. So here you have a Nintendo Switch game in a giant Nintendo Switch case, which it's probably the average size of a case, but I mean, compared to the games, the cases are just very big for only one reason, and that's to prevent shoplifting. It would make so much sense for Nintendo Switch games cases to be a lot smaller, on potentially just like blister packs even. I guess it also, the plastic protects from damage to the game cartridge, but the odds of that happening are pretty low. You seem to get, I assume this is an art book and not just a cover for the CD soundtrack, and then you seem to get a collection of pencil board little posters. And if anything, this kind of highlights how the Akiba's Trip series is not really as lewd and nude as you would think. You can see it's rated for sexual themes, but not actual nudity. And in each of these screenshots that they're showing, unless there's something hidden behind the other ones, which maybe there are, it seems like it is mostly just different costumes. And that's really what the game is more about. It's about clothing, stealing clothing from emotional vampires. This is the game that was the remake and director's cut of the first Akiba Strip game, which was released after the second game was released in the West. So everything is really backwards. One can only hope that this works fairly well to settle everything and get it straightened out, so they could potentially make another Akiba Strip game. Technically, I think this is a JRPG, but they're calling it an action-adventure game. So this is kind of a great example of the wide variety of Japanese games and JRPG games. I still would lean more to it being somewhat of a role-playing game, but maybe not so much, because I know you get outfits, and the outfits, I think, change your stats. At least in the second game, I'm fairly certain that's what happens. So that would be enough RPG-like elements for me to call it an RPG. Maybe the character doesn't level up, or maybe he's not really playing a role so much as just acting out the singular linear story. Moving on, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising has the Anila gameplay trailer, which I feel like we had already seen this. If not, we really just saw the teaser here. She's a lamb girl riding a lamb. The animation certainly looks very nice for this fighting game. It does potentially create this weird situation though, where if you just wanted to see the animations, it almost feels like there should be a story mode in fighting games, and in the sense that you cannot lose and all the animations are played for you. Like you're getting to a level where the animation is so nice that it does just kind of feel like you could make a anime based on it and show off fighting. And that's been the feeling I've certainly had with fighting games, is that I probably would enjoy them more watching a professional doing nice moves than trying to button mash and do the attacks myself. Um, but also the professionals tend to do ridiculous combos and move too fast for even my eyes, which are fairly used to fast action. This trailer is just jumping between animated cutscenes and the actual in-game footage. So, okay. It was only a matter of time, but a new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi game has been announced. Official title and release date have not been announced. This is our third to last Gamatsu article. But yeah, I couldn't really tell you too much as far as what Budokai Tenkaichi is, but I would assume that it is a anime series after Dragon Ball Z Budokai, which I would assume moves the story forward from Dragon Ball Z and very possibly several other Dragon Ball Z sequels. I know there's been several, and I don't know if they're all in the same timeline, in the same canon. You can see the blue-haired Goku and the blue-haired Vegeta, which means they are at Super Blue state, I think is what it's called, as far as Super Saiyans. So they're to the next level as far as just power creep getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, not really surprising that they'd make yet another Dragon Ball game. I still have yet to actually play Dragon Ball Fighter Z, but I really think I only have enough room in my budget to own one Dragon Ball Fighter game that's pretty good, and possibly one Dragon Ball more story focused game. I think it probably would be faster to play a video game going through the events of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, Dragon Ball whatever, Budokai Tenkaichi, whatever, wherever as far as the game goes. I think that would be faster than trying to watch the anime series or read the manga. But may not be that much faster, really. It may still be an incredibly long experience. Gamatsu has this week's game releases: Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, Oni Road to the Mightiest Oni, and more. I don't think the reviews were particularly good for the Oni game. Mask of Lunar Eclipse is just a remaster of an old game. Ib, I don't know about. Motto Anomalies, I don't know about. And Ray's Arcade Chronology, I don't know about. And of course, the digital only games are going to have a decent amount of games I don't recognize either. Noticeably, Gamatsu has dropped the ball as far as talking about some of these games, because I don't recognize any of these. And maybe there was an article and I just burned through it and didn't pay attention and don't remember it. I will say, it seems like it's about half as many digital-only releases this week than last week. Probably because we're getting close to the Tokyo Game Show and they're saving up for announcements there. Seems even like there's maybe 2 or 3 physical releases less. Certainly. We still are in a weird situation, certainly as far as Koei Tecmo, Konami, Sega, almost all the Japanese companies, with the exception of Nintendo, as far as just, are these publishers good publishers or bad publishers, or is the concept of there being a good publisher or a bad publisher just completely dead at this point? Like, I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a Konami game, and you would think you could say no to Konami games, but there's not that much consistency to it. Even Nintendo really isn't consistent as far as its quality. It's mostly consistent, but not 100% consistent. I probably do need to hurry up a little bit more, but we should be fine. A game called Across the Valley launches April 6th for the PC, PSVR 2, and PlayStation 5, which probably means it's only the PSVR 2. A farming raising game with cutesy animation style in VR. Makes it very questionable why it needs to be in VR, though. And very questionable as far as just how do you walk around in this environment, or are you just teleporting yourself? Doesn't really look like much of a game, though, even that much of a farming game, because once you lose that top-down perspective, you lose the ability to walk around and move really fast and plant lots of crops. Most farming simulators are built around the idea of doing the work that a tractor would really need to do on very much larger acreages of land, and they're magically turning that into a person just walking around planting one plant and having that plant grow a lot faster or yield a lot more food or have food that sells for a lot more money. Even in this case, you have like 4 chickens, and I've done some light research on this, and it's like you have a really tiny chick here and a very big chick here, when all your chicks really need to be as close to the same size and hatched at the same time. You would need a brooding hen to take care of all of these chickens, which would mean they should be closer, much closer to one of these chickens than the others. They're not going to probably have 4 pure white chickens anyways as far as laying hens, and they probably need a lot more of them overall too. Moving on. Let's see. Soko Chess White. We'll give that a chance. Life is Pain. I think we can say no to that. We're looking through games on Steam. Gun King, I'm going to say no to. No Way Out. I think there's multiple games called No Way Out on Steam, which arguably there should be some limitations there. I don't know how you fix that or how you're fair about that. I think the best thing to do would be to allow all of any company to have the same name, unless the name is actually copyrighted or trademarked, and then have, did you mean this or this game or this game, like Wikipedia does, where there's just in line a this game is referencing this, but click this if you meant this. Bear Cycle doesn't look polished enough. Dice Hero. This doesn't even look like it really much of a dice game. Yeah. I don't think I could say yes to this. It's almost polished enough to give it a chance. I did get my YouTube shorts scheduled, so in the 10 a.m. slot, which is going to come out right as I'm streaming for YouTube shorts, I should have a lot of shorts scheduled. I'm going to drop what was the 4 a.m. slot So it should be 6, 8, and 10. And any new YouTube shorts will be added to whatever is furthest behind. So we've got our first adult game. This came out March 3rd, so we're kind of far behind as far as new releases too. That March 3rd would have been like Friday. We have MILF Muscle here. It's a flat 2D lady. I would say bright, colorful anime style stuff. Big breasts, thus Muscle MILF being the name. Incidents of bondage or shibari rope tying, and an incident of eating sushi off of it. I don't even know what that would be called, though, if there's any bigger name to it. It's selling for $9.59. It is a visual novel. It has Japanese and English full audio on it, and yeah, it definitely looks like a quality quality adult visual novel with 11 scenes, and that's what we're always looking for, is just quality adult content in the adult section on Steam, appropriately labeled and described. And rarely do we get it, but when we do get it, it does show something. Cams says on the chat, WTF is this? Bro, you have balls for showing this in YouTube. It's blurred, and it's educational purposes, and it's for news and informative educational purposes. So I don't know how I can cover adult games and be any more responsible with that. I can also say my channel is either so small that YouTube doesn't take notice, or YouTube's okay with what I've done. To my understanding, I am within what YouTube says was acceptable. Maybe they'll change the rules on me tomorrow. Who knows? But yeah. How can people make proper consumer decisions as far as new games coming out when I have to censor myself and not talk at all about games that are adult games, when, let's be honest here, there is a massive niche audience that spends a lot of money buying adult games on Steam. And if anything, Steam needs to become a better storefront with more adult games at higher quality, not less adult games. The vast majority of games on Steam, whether adult or otherwise, are absolute garbage. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot of research that most people don't have the time or energy to do, to try to find even a few hidden gems as far as games go. Now, in all fairness, I'm going to give this one a follow and see if maybe it gets reviewed well. It is viewed very positively already. Interesting. But the chapter 1 is concerning, really. And the fact that it looks kind of asset flippy, but at least somewhat visually polished. What's more concerning here is that it looks like it might just be a empty walking simulator. I have given some thought to perhaps having a warning at the very beginning of the stream that this video will contain adult content, may contain adult content, really at the beginning. But I don't even start to look at the games until usually 2 hours into a stream, so it almost feels like you're scaring off people for no reason. I definitely would be a more lenient type of parent if in general. So I personally wouldn't care if a kid knew that adult games were being sold on Steam, uh, or saw me showing a blurred image and talking about a blurred image of a game. I know a lot of other parents would have that problem, but most of those parents that have that problem, here we have another adult game, don't like video games in general, so they're already having tight controls. We're also talking Steam PC games here, which is mostly teenagers and above. You tend not to give computers to little kids. But yeah, I have arguably more concerns, and it's not even a real big concern, as far as the perhaps overdevelopment of a fetish for either flat 2D anime style adult characters instead of real characters, and or even 3D CGI characters like in this game, which is called Sex Simulator Office Affairs. You get a lot of these visual novels too. This is a visual novel, right? Where it is the same 3D models posed over and over again and then sold as a visual novel. You get perhaps a little bit more variety in a lot of these games, because there's usually 2 or 3 girls in the 3D CGI visual novels that are more Western focused. You get more variety in the women, you get less variety typically in the actual adult acts they engage with. This game is only selling for $2.09, so the cost is cheaper, and this is English only. But I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these are like 20-minute long experiences too. You still would probably be paying a lot more if you were buying like some of this content from a premium porn site, but there might be a subscription fee that makes a little bit more sense. Of course, you could also probably find a lot of this for free online on porn sites too. Yep. Yeah, there is definitely an argument for live action porn being part of your buffet of porn if you're looking at porn at all, and not solely focusing on video game visual novels that are either 3D CGI or flat 2D anime games. But noticeably, that is one gap specifically on Steam, in which that is a step too far for Steam. There is 100% censorship on any full motion video of an adult nature. I've never seen a single full motion video in the adult store, which is a little bit inaccurate in the sense that, since I'm not going to do anything with this, if we go to the game Immortality, where is it? Come on. How am I misspelling this with 2 R's? There we go. Immortality. This game here, that is a full motion video game with some secrets, actually does have nudity in it. So yeah, there's a lot of sex and nudity in this game, but noticeably it is not on the it's not in the adult store. Everything in the adult store is got that banner that this is in the adult store, and you only will see this if you go into your Steam preferences and choose to see this. Since this is very positive, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the wish list. again, I potentially would have trouble covering a game like this on Steam. It's from Sam Barlow and Mermaid, Her Mermaid, Half Mermaid, which Sam Barlow's first game, Her Story, was very impressive. But I'm not sure his next couple ones. So yeah, Immortality contains strong language, violence, blood, and gore, as well as nudity, sexual content, and use of alcohol and drugs. Refer to halfmermaid.co/content warning for a detailed content warning even more. I don't think Half Mermaid. Oh, they also published Telling Lies, which you can see is mixed reviewed here. Like, people didn't really like it. And all the Sam Barlow games kind of follow this video scrubbing concept. You can see Her Story was very popular, Telling Lies as a follow-up, not as popular. I think the main problem with Telling Lies is that you couldn't rewind the video. Immortality, you can rewind the video. There's definitely an argument that Immortality is more of an art piece than even a video game. Should make a YouTube short around that too. Of course, when I make YouTube shorts, they're automated, so who knows what happens when the play button happens there. But yeah, I really am just dancing a dangerous tune, dancing to a dangerous tune, or dancing a dangerous dance with the YouTube shorts too. Just waiting till YouTube gives me any kind of demonetization warning or anything like that, which I really just have not seen. Does this support English? Nope, this is a Korean only game, which is a shame because it kind of does look somewhat interesting. Yeah, and at a certain point, if I was... Here we have another adult game. And this came out the 4th. Yeah, at a certain point, if I got 1,000 subscribers and got enough watch time, or somehow got 10 million YouTube short views, and was up for being reapproved in the YouTube Partner Program, they might come back and say, we've looked at your content and it has too much adult content for your tastes, which hopefully they could give me some options to potentially private or delete some videos or edit out some sections. I can say in the past there was like an adult sex scene in Witcher 3, and I was able to just edit the video in their own editor, and then they didn't have a problem with it. So they're not 100% against adult content on their servers as much as they're just against family friendly content or unfamily friendly content being presented or mislabeled, although the rules were changed here. This is interesting because this game, Zombie Survivals 18 plus, has this 3D CGI lady, but she's like incredibly skinny. In fact, her arms are way too skinny. I wish I could show this, but she's like naked here, and she has this unique short haircut. It comes off almost like she's yeah, let's see, we can show this. Just like incredibly long and skinny arms, kind of a long neck, short hair. It's almost like a Pixar movie. I'm thinking like the Incredibles type character, and it's not just your standard asset flipped 3D CGI characters that you would normally see. That being said, this is really just a top-down twin-stick shooter in which they've added adult content to, which that doesn't inherently mean it's bad. But it does create a interesting possibility where it might be one new genre of game in which they could add adult content to, in which people actually would want adult content added to it, or it might just be a low effort asset flip. They are comparing the game to Haiti here, which was a game that was a very difficult platforming puzzle game and with shooting elements, but not enough bullets really to defeat any enemies, and thus I could not defeat it. Also, it didn't have any checkpointing in it, which was a nightmare. And the big sales point here is that you have this robot lady with big boobs and a big butt and a thong, and while the game sells on the big boobs and the butt and the thong, the actual gameplay really sucks. Seems like there's another game or two with this same character, so it seems almost like they made the character and then they are reusing the character multiple times. The other game is called 6 Room brackets 18 plus. Yeah, same character. And yeah, I don't know if the blur particularly blurs that well when something's in motion. You get a lot more detail in that case. But yeah, almost certainly the top-down twin-stick shooting zombie thing is where you're going to spend 99% of your time in a game like this. So I'd like to see something like this succeed, but my own experience, jadedness, definitely points to the thought that it probably wouldn't succeed. I don't know if that really is a good mesh. Like the visual novel aspect and the slide puzzle aspects and the match 3 games are the only types of games with adult content that I've ever seen that make even a slight bit of sense. They actually do synergize fairly well with the adult content. That being said, you talk about Witcher 3. Witcher 3 had adult content in it, and it worked perfectly fine as a game. So you could easily sneak in adult content into any game at reasonable amounts. But also in Witcher 3, if you were looking for adult content in The Witcher 3, you probably would have to spend 6 to 8 hours to see any of it, and then 6 to 8 hours to see the next bit of it. Well, I guess at a certain point you could probably run to the House of Ill Repute in Witcher 3, maybe. Maybe that was an option. I don't know. I didn't do it because I was making footage. That looks like garbage. I don't think Apex Point is anything. It's been in development since 2018. Japanese car culture, customizing race types, choose your own path. Still in early access in 2023. Yeah, I mean, you literally unsold me on this game by saying it's been in development since 2018 and it's still in development in 2023. 5 years plus of development. You shouldn't admit that. Man, and this is the 5th, so this weekend was very solid as far as adult games, making up for what was a kind of slow release of adult games over the past week. So we have Hentai Casual Slider 3, which is just flat 2D hentai anime girl pictures that are either licensed or just downloaded from the internet. Nothing really special here, not much you can say. It's a slide puzzle, it has multiple sizes. It is only selling for 79 cents. It's also only supporting English language. So yeah, not a lot to say there. I guess you've got 2 or 3 girls with different hair colors, but they're all either Asian or white girls. No tattoos, no bondage, nothing particularly special. If anything, the poses are all fairly similar. Front-on shots, lying down shots. Um, so yeah, nothing really to say on that one. Next we have the Homecoming exhibition, which looks like it's probably a VR museum, which I would like these to be more successful, but they run into the constant problem of either having random art from people you probably won't know. They're saying this one's inspired by Hiroshi Shinju's museum. Experience the future of art with groundbreaking work of Nako Baev, and the developer and publisher is Nako Baev. So literally, this is him showing off his own art, his own 3D art. And I guess at a certain point, if you are a 3D artist, this would be about the only way you could show off your art, unless you can convince a museum to put up a TV or a 3D VR headset. In fairness, it's free, so the price is right for art. Art should be free. It's English only. That being said, I'm not seeing anything that's particularly interesting as an art piece. Like, none of this screams that intriguing. And if anything, his contrast of black and whites is being hurt with the all white backgrounds. Generally, you would have all white backgrounds in a museum or something like that, but there needs to be a frame around this so that you can actually see the edges, and arguably this probably would be a collection that would look better these if you were in a dark room with black backgrounds and lighting pointing directly on the pictures. It just makes every screenshot here feel blown out and too much white, too much minimalism. Let's see. Come on. Moving on. We have a game called For the Fatherland. Looks like you play as a German. Allied invasion, defending German territories in France. So it sounds like you're probably playing as the Germans, which I don't know how many people really want to play as the Germans. A lot of these games feel like they sometimes are straight up just jokes or trolls. Now I will say this game does look a little bit more polished than just an asset flip or troll, but it's got that low polygon feel, which always feels a little low effort. And I'm not really seeing anything that's that interesting here, so I'm gonna skip it. Sky Strikers VR. At this point, I'm pretty much saying no to VR games even being added to the follow list unless they are really, really high quality, and I'm mostly removing VR games from my follow list anyways. Follow list here. So I'm gonna say no to that. Weggy's Adventure either is a low effort game or it's some kind of secret game that has something else in it. I would imagine it's probably just a low effort garbage game. Metal Punch looks like it might be something, so apparently it already has a follow on it, so I'll leave it on the follow list. Dark Prospect. Looks like a survival game with some different kinds of monsters. The problem here is certainly that I just don't think any of these base building survival games catch my attention enough, so even if you do have somewhat interesting monsters to fight, it doesn't really work. Like, it is a little surprising that a game like Doom in the Doom reboot didn't try to make a survival kind of Fortnite clone experience there, where you're base building. The only game I guess that really has done base building would be Fallout 4 as far as a settlement building, and even that felt incredibly disconnected from the rest of the game. from what I saw. Not having not played Fallout 4 yet. But yeah, I think the survival base building concept really is just not as appealing as people thought it would be. You have games like Raft where that's a big part of it, but even Raft I think is fairly limited, or Conan Exiles should potentially be even more limited than it is. But just generic building a wall and building a ceiling, that stuff I think is a little boring. Let's see. Come on. Next we have a game called Air Star. Let's see. I have no idea what this is. It says throw planes, buy upgrades, place towers to defend against the oncoming waves of luggage. So it's a tower defense game with luggage? Could I possibly fix this? Yeah, the video is actually playing, so maybe I did fix it. Alright, well, generally I say no to tower defense games because I don't think there's really that many people that actually care about tower defense games. But I have to admit that this does seem to put an interesting twist on it, so I'm going to make an exception and make a YouTube short on that. Now, we haven't seen a YouTube short, a hidden object game in a while. I'll give this a chance too. This game had an incredibly deceptive trailer for it that made it look like it was going to be 3D live action, when in reality it's much more of a flat top-down game. Yeah, it is weird. We haven't seen a hidden object game in a while. I'll keep an eye out for that and see if Big Fish Games puts out anything in the next week or so. Should I give a game like Mega Mall Story a chance? It's not something I would want to play, but I think it probably does deserve to have a YouTube short built around it. Like, the stakes are incredibly low as far as YouTube shorts. We'll give this a chance anyways. So all the YouTube shorts are promising is to show off a new game that might be interesting or might be relevant. Here we have a Japanese only game which doesn't look hugely polished, but it is noticeably trying to do a more Doom style run and gun shooter. Visually it really does look like a mess. It's just a lot of dark screenshot syndrome happening here, and the heads up display looks like a mess. But I do have to applaud a Japanese creator for even trying to do a first person shooter Doom style game, because you just don't see those style games very often. Most Japanese games like this, you would either be taking a picture or casting some kind of magical charm to defeat monsters, or just running away from monsters. You wouldn't be pulling out a gun and shooting them. Let's see. Berg Wimmel. Hand-painted objects. This is a hidden object game. Yeah, I'll give that a follow. So, Saving May looks like an adult game. Let's look at the mature content before we go any further. This game includes nudity of the character's body, as well as exposed clothing, breast shakes and hips, and other body physical effects. So let's blur it. This is a great example of an adult game that's not in the adult section, which there's still a high percentage of that happens. And there is a high percentage of, we can show this, what are just low effort asset flips and games that pretend like there's adult content in it, or they have an adult patch, but it's an extremely minimal amount of adult content in the first place. Here you can see this interface as far as 4 different survival energy bars and inventory. All seems kind of unnecessary if you are interested in an adult game, and only kind of makes sense if you're interested in playing a survival game where you're farming, fishing, and combat elements and systems somehow. Mostly this just looks like this is a asset flip 3D model on an asset flip beach in a bikini. There is something to be said as far as a red flag when every screenshot has your character facing away and is just showing the butt. There should be at least a couple of pictures where you're looking towards the face of the character. And definitely you should have some screenshots that give you a general idea of what the gameplay mechanics are or what the enemies are going to be. Looks like there might be one enemy in the distance here in that screenshot, and that's it. This is early access and it's English and Chinese. That is also a big red flag when Chinese games try to do adult content because of their own culture and their own censorship laws. They tend to put characters in bikinis, and that's about it. There is no DLC for this to perhaps put them in even skimpier clothes than just a 2-piece bikini, which really isn't that skimpy. So, yep. I wouldn't put a lot of hopes in that. I wouldn't put a lot of hopes in games that promise to be adult but aren't in the adult section unless they have a 18 plus patch, and then even then you're going to get a minimal amount of content like that. Usually if you have a RPG Maker style game that has adult content, they'll release that as an 18 plus adult patch. Next we have a game that came out just today called Ghostly Moans. Usually it's not this often, so this is one of those RPG Maker games where it is mostly just going to be an RPG Maker with a few images. The images are flat 2D, but I would say they probably are animated by a Westerner, not a Japanese person, because the character designs definitely aren't going for the Japanese cutesy kawaii design or moe design. They're going for taller, more anatomically correct looking characters. Your main character has long blonde hair and big breasts and long legs and long arms. The problem with these JRPG Maker games in general is that they are not very good. They're more than likely not very good. They never look very good as far as the RPG Maker content, and that's generally the case with any RPG Maker game, is that they don't look very unique or entertaining. Ghostly Moans is $9.34 unless you buy the guide in the deluxe edition, which brings it up to $13.55. It's English only, subtitles only, no audio language at all. Seems to be sexual relations among women and ghosts, consensual, non-consensual, as far as the mature content stuff goes. Not particularly an impressive looking adult game, but it is probably better that a game like this is in the adult section instead of flooding the main feeds of people looking at new games on Steam who have no interest in an RPG Maker game that only has the one sales point of having adult content. Seems to me like there would be no reason to play the Ghostly Moans if it didn't have the adult content, which is the other problem on Steam. Certainly is that there's a lot of games that have just been cut, had the content cut, and then you're just left with garbage looking RPG Maker games. And I say RPG Maker meaning they look like they were made in RPG Maker, not guaranteeing that they actually were made in RPG Maker. this Talus game might be something, so I'll give it a chance. And then these other games are like, there's really just not a lot of comment that you could say on here. This looks like this is a Tamagotchi clone that's not even that complicated for a Tamagotchi clone, with only feed, clean, and play. The play part in particular, even on the original Tamagotchis, I think had multiple mini games you played with them to give you some more interest. And then sleep, I think, was also an option, even in the original Tamagotchis. Riding horse school with not quite that much polish. You're kind of in a catch-22 where it would be nice to have more like horse riding games. There's very few people that can ride horses, mostly rich people. Let's face it, mostly rich white Western people. It's actually a very dangerous hobby because they don't wear anywhere enough padding as they should. They wear just a very simplistic helmet when the horse can easily knock you off and step on you and kick you and just kill you. Little girls are advertised a lot of horse products every now and then, so they tend to be interested in that. But as far as video games, there aren't very many options, and they all tend to be pretty low effort. Whereas when you're depicting a horse and its movements, you really would want it to be much more polished and much prettier. Even the horse in The Witcher 3 is notorious for being buggy and not particularly that appealing of a thing to interact with. But if you were to make a polished horse riding simulator type game or horse riding game of any sense, I'll give this a chance. It also probably wouldn't sell too well because it is just such a small niche audience. It's an example of the type of game that would have a justification to charge $70 or $80 instead of $60, and that really would not fly well on Steam in particular. Alright, well, that was all the games that came out on Steam. A very large amount of adult games today. I would say at least 3 or more. Noticeably, no furry games today. No anthropomorphic animals of any sort. We still are really at a point though where if I was going to name adult games that might be worth really looking at, you have like Lust from Beyond as an option. Witcher 3 weirdly might be your best option as far as a game with adult content that isn't actually an adult game. Honey Pop 1 and 2 would be an option to recommend as far as adult games, but that's kind of it. There's that game Mirror that a lot of people buy. I don't know if that's particularly that good of a game though. There definitely are a lot of visual novels that have adult content in them that, because of their story, are worth playing, but not particularly for the adult content. So, and I'm really going over just all recent history in the last decade or two as far as adult games. You could get the Leisure Suit Larry games, but those games laughably really don't have that much adult content in them. That's kind of it, though. Noticeably, we don't have the old God of War games, which had sex mini games, but they really didn't have adult content in it. I don't think you could easily install the hot coffee mod on GTA 4 or whichever one it was, GTA 3 maybe. Yeah, there's just really been a very bad history for games that have been, video games have been coming out since at least the mid 70s, and there's been an incredibly small history of good adult games, and very little of it has been preserved. It is probably historically relevant enough that a game like Custard's Revenge for Atari should be available for purchase on Steam, and yet who would really put it out for sale? That would be kind of silly and crazy. The ESRB in particular has actively pushed for decades to limit and not review games that have adult content. Anything that is an adult game gets an adults only rating, and anything with an adults only rating has been actively denied any shelf space in Walmart, which is the biggest seller, or has been the biggest seller for video games. GameStop might have some under the counter adult only games, but I don't know if they actually are still doing that. And Target, I suspect, probably doesn't have any shelf space that for adult only games. There's really probably less than 50 adult only rated ESRB games in the first place. BMX XXX might be an example of one that I know was actually in a GameStop. I don't know if it was supposed to be on the shelves of the GameStop, and they sold it to me when I was an underage teenager. I didn't even tell from the logo. I literally thought it was a biking game, and so I was somewhat surprised when there was live action strippers in BMX XXX. But yeah, you're really not talking a lot of games. Most of adult games are anime Japanese games, and those tend not to come out on consoles, and only fairly recently are even coming out to PC into the West. Moving on. I talk too much about adult games, I know, but it is really the topic of censorship and whether people have the right to play what they want to, or whether society has the right to censor and hide things from people. We have some GameDeveloper.com articles, and then we'll do some flawless cleanup, and then that will be the end of this stream. A U.S. representative could legislate to challenge game companies over online harassment. I think we had already talked about this. Congresswoman Lori Trahan doesn't think video games have been transparent enough about how they tackle online extremism. This almost certainly is not going to go anywhere. Generally, I think the Congress is in kind of a do-nothing state at the moment in the United States, not to get too deep into politics, but I think Democrats own the Senate or control the Senate, and Republicans control the House. As my understanding is, then the House has to create a bill most of the time and then vote that bill to the Senate. So anything that the House Republicans make as a bill has a hard time getting approved by a Democratic controlled Senate. So no real laws will be passed. That tends to be the case in the United States, where the government just moves slow anyways. And yeah, nothing really happens. Best you can usually hope from a session of Congress is that they will just get their butts into gear and pass the budget to maintain the government and not go bankrupt or default on their debt. I don't think it's actually bankruptcy in the case of a government. The thing to happen here is often I respond to these kinds of articles and go, I don't really see the online extremism. In fairness, I don't play online, so I have perfectly excised myself from any kind of online harassment or extremism, whatever extremism means to you as far as online content goes. But I definitely hear video game companies constantly talk about their toxic player base, their toxic players, and what they're doing to stop toxicity in video games. So I think they really are trying as best as they can, um, perhaps to censor things that not everybody agrees should be censored, but they definitely seem to be trying to reduce toxicity. If anything, the mess that is being on live chat in a video game highlights just the vast amount of racism and sexism and just hate in general that is freely expressed and easily expressed by people who feel they have some level of anonymity. And the truth is that it's just a reflection of the world as a whole, is that people are hateful. People have been raised to be hateful by other people who are hateful. It's a horrific cycle that started back when there was only two cavemen and one hit the other with a rock and stole his wife. Like that is just the nature of humans, and them like carrying grudges generationally, or carrying even just hate generationally. I don't think there's a high amount of like terrorism recruiting happening in video games or anything like that. I think it's just a lot of edgelord 12-year-olds using the N-word for the first time, or just a bunch of angry drunk people, even young adults. And I really don't know what video games can do. Like, it feels like if a law like this really got passed, it would just give video game companies an excuse to get rid of chat, to get rid of all ways to communicate that works fairly well for a lot of games, frankly. But it also makes a lot of games a problem. And there has definitely been some movements to overreach as far as censoring people when you're in a group of your own friends and you're getting in trouble because of the thing you're saying to your own friends group in a friend's local chat. That seems like an overreach past the point of freedom of expression, which inherently any law that this congresswoman made would be shot down against the First Amendment, which is the most important amendment. They go in order of importance as far as how the Supreme Court looks at it. So a Second Amendment argument is trumped by a First Amendment argument, and so on and so on. Which, yeah. There has been some overreach. I can see enforcing some level of public decorum when you're on a public server and everybody can hear you. But even in the real world, that's not really how reality works. Anybody can walk into a church and then be crazy and scream foul obscenities in a church. And while they can be slugged by the person next to them, which is not legal and it would be considered assault, or they can be dragged out by security, which is probably a little bit more legal, or they could be arrested for disturbance of the peace, which is probably a law that shouldn't really exist because it's too vague. Nowhere in the real world can you put a muzzle on somebody, some kind of like digital muzzle, and at some point somebody is going to figure out some technology like that where they have like a digital muzzle on people and they try to say a certain thing and it just zaps them or silences them. Like, that's never been the case in the real world. Hopefully it never gets to the case where like that in the real world. But yeah, in the real world, people have the right to speech and should have the right to speech. And in video games, to a certain extent, same should be true. Like, you've got to protect the awful speech and the disgusting speech, all the racism, sexism, everything that you might hear online. All of that has to be protected. Otherwise, you will just create a slippery slope uh, that just gets eroded time and time again. And in particular, this is also a great example of how the US government and many governments have turned over a lot of their policing to private entities so that the private entities can do things that the Constitution would explicitly forbid the government from doing. So, yeah, this is literally a situation where a congresswoman may be asking private companies to eliminate the First Amendment rights of their players. And that's why when I talk about free speech, I'm not talking specifically about the United States First Amendment right to free speech or even the Magna Carta's defined First Amendment or the Magna Carta's defined free speech. I'm talking about a living, breathing concept of free speech that all societies need and need to believe in, something that we are arguing is a right that all humans should have in all countries. At the beginning of the Constitution, we hold these truths to be, I forget the next word, but very much at the beginning of the Constitution, they're saying we believe these are rights that are God-given, that all humans deserve to have, not something that the United States government is making a special exemption to give to U.S. citizens. Although arguably the United States government has also argued that most people outside of the United States, non-U.S. citizens, don't have any protection under the Constitution at all, and that they can do whatever they want. Which, yeah, I don't think that's within the spirit of the creation of the United States. Anyways, I'm getting probably too political. Anyways, we had already talked about this, I think, but Nintendo took the Wii U games Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon 1 offline. They're addressing some kind of security exploit. I almost have to assume the security exploit has more to do with running pirated copies of games and has nothing to do with protecting, say, other people's data or privacy. Well, actually, if I scroll down here and read more, it says a Nintendo specific emulation speculated the vulnerability issue in question is the ENL buffer pawn, an exploit which would allow someone to take over another player's console just by playing a multiplayer game with them. Okay, so if you took over someone else's console, what can you do then? Well, I guess at a certain point it doesn't matter what you can do then. If you have full control at that point, full remote control, that is too much. But yeah, I guess I am jaded here because I really would have just assumed that it was a piracy thing. Although in all fairness, Nintendo isn't so knee-jerk that they would take down a game just because there's some way to run pirated games on particularly the Wii U. I don't think they really care if you could run pirated games on the Wii U at this point. Let's see. There was this article where Meta slashed the price of the Meta Quest 2 and Meta Quest Pro headsets. Of course, slashing is a relative term here because the price went from went from like $500 to $430 or so. So it's still extremely expensive. And they had raised the price by $100 before. So, yeah. Slashing really isn't a phrase to use when you're talking $429 or $1,000. Yeah, this looks like a decently nice looking pair of augmented reality or VR headsets, but it's not that good. It's not worth $1,000 unless it's got some technology I'm completely unaware of. It's very hard to justify potentially paying for that when you could step down to $500 and get the PlayStation VR 2, particularly if you're interested in playing video games. Alright, let's look at these follow list games. We're following the standard rules. The game must be relevant, and it has 30 reviews. I think going forward for this podcast, which is I guess what we're calling, I will describe the explanations better of what I'm doing. So it must be relevant by having at least 30 reviews. They must be mostly positive, and it must happen in less than 6 months to a year of its release, which this game follows all of those requirements. The other requirement certainly is it needs to be a game that I would likely cover and play, which means single player focused. A game like this might be a co-op game, but actually isn't. But yeah, needs to be single player focused or just generally something that looks like I would want to play. This one meets all those requirements, so it goes from our follow list to the wish list. Everything on my wish list is something I might buy in the future, although in all fairness I have not been buying a lot of games lately. And I ask people to potentially support my channel by friending me on Steam and gifting me games too. That's a way to cut YouTube out of the middleman position. Of course, honestly, at this point I would prefer people just support me by Patreon than gift me a game. I'd like to see actual money come in, and I have so many video games and just not really enough time or energy. This looks like an interesting game, but it's not very relevant. So I will make exceptions at times. I don't know if I really should make an exception this time, though. I'm going to give this more time to think about it. Crash Drive 3. Not a super fan of racing games, but this almost feels like a Micro Machine game. Oh yes, it also needs to be out of early access. I don't want to play any unfinished games. So I'll put this on the wish list. And then once about a year, I'll usually do a wish list cleanup. A game like Crash Bandicoot 4 should have been on the wish list already. I'm going through my follow list, and I use a program to open all these tabs. A macro I programmed, and so it pulls everything up alphabetically through the follow list. So we're going through things starting with C. There is a weirdness, I think, around Crash Bandicoot 4 that I would feel the desire to at least somewhat look at Crash Bandicoot 1. Story-driven VR shooter set in a dark atmosphere of Victorian England. Early access from 2020. So that's going to leave because it's still in early access. It's also going to leave because it's VR and does not look that good. If this wasn't a VR game, I might have given it a little bit more of a chance, but even at that, the screenshots don't look particularly that good. There is definitely also a case where the standards tend to be somewhat low as far as what I put on the follow list, depending on how mentally exhausted I am when I'm looking at things, looking at new games. Cracking the Cryptic here, it is a YouTuber, and so he's got his own YouTube Sudoku solving channel where he solves one puzzle every day or so. and he's got his own thing. It's very popular. I'm not sure how many Sudoku games I really would play, but there's really no reason not to get this. Some DLC could certainly bump this up to $8, where it's actually free to play at the moment. That being said, it is also worth mentioning that there's a lot of different Sudoku games here, which are slightly different variations on Sudoku if you're that into the weeds of it. And so you definitely would want to start with just like classic Sudoku here to start with, and then you have to learn different rules for things like killer Sudoku, whereas cracking the cryptic may be a whole combination of different puzzles. And I have done Sudokus in the past, but I don't do them specifically very much. It's nice to see it's playable on Steam Deck. It really is the kind of game you would want to play on Steam Deck. Although, you also have a lot of keyboard and mouse interfaces you'd want to do with this to move quickly. It's cozy time out of early access. Produce cozy environments to focus and relax in. So it's basically a room decorator game. I'm not sure I really want to play a game like this, and it doesn't really seem like you're doing that much decoration. $2.99. Focus time, relaxing lo-fi music. This almost is like one of those games that you would buy if you're a streamer just to have playing as a I'll be right back type thing. Yeah, I don't think there's enough variety here. Like, what it is showing looks interesting, certainly, but what it isn't showing is any real variety. Just different times in the exact same room. So I'm going to say no to that. County Hospital. It's probably an asset flip horror game. Regardless, it kind of doesn't matter. It's just not relevant. There's definitely a lot of horror games that have been released on Steam. Country Ball Heroes. Not sure if this meme style game is really worth covering. I think I'm going to say no to it, because I never really got into this whole country ball thing. I don't think it's really that popular. So yeah, it just doesn't quite pass the is it something I want to play or would have anything to say about it. I can say it's $14.99, which just sounds a little expensive. And then Cotton Reboot is mixed reviewed, which I would have wanted it to be more successful. Part of the problem certainly here is that even discounted is $18 for a reboot of a 30-year-old side-scrolling shooter game. Yeah, I think we can say no to that. Here you have a very 80s style anime girl that is not of the current animation style, and same as even here as far as this character. Of course, those were the old days when they would sell with cover art like that, and then the actual game would look nothing like that. And then we have Cosplay Love. Does this have adult content in it? Includes nudity and nudity of some characters, so let's censor here and see what all of the screenshots are before we start talking about it. Alright, seems fine. This came out last year on March, so it's a year old. Here you can see they have live 2D animation, which this is the new trend to a higher polished way of making visual novels, to have the characters wave back and forth and have the lips sometimes sync, or just even swaying back and forth to feel like a actual image and animation, while not really being actually much of an animation that's been hand animated. That being said, one of the games, my favorite game, Destiny Child, which is a lewd waifu mobile game, they had this whole spa section in Destiny Child where they were doing live 2D animations, and they eventually just gave up on it and went to static 2D animations instead, because I don't think too many people cared about the spa section, and it was probably wasting their animators' time. Noticeably on these screenshots, I suspect you won't get live 2D when you have an image like this or this. This is probably live 2D, so there's even a slight discrepancy there. Same here. Probably not here. Like, there is a slight difference even in how it's animated when you're doing live 2D, because they're focusing on a just facing forward direction, where a more cinematic angle, Dutch angle, is being used for these other screenshots. That being said, it's just not relevant enough, and it's a dating sim game. Slightly erotic young romance story between two people brought together through cosplay. I have somewhat started to talk about cosplay. I'll take that off. It's just not relevant enough. I could give it more time, certainly, but yeah. It's probably never going to be discounted enough. It's full Japanese audio, and that's another thing certainly to keep an eye out for. But this is also a great example of, here's a Japanese game that could have been an adult game, and they chose not to go that route. I doubt that there actually is adult content being censored here. There might be, but it's not needed either, because they probably have a slightly better story. Alright. Let's bring back the Yu-Gi-Oh! And then I'll scroll down my Twitter feed and we'll see. We don't really have anything to do here. As far as a Duel Live, I could start a Duel Live, I guess. We'll go ahead and do that just to kill time and spectate. Yeah, and ever since I started to open multiple windows, it creates a different situation as far as getting back to my Twitter feed. Arguably, maybe I need to have my Twitter feed pinned on each new window so I can go back and do that. That seems redundant, certainly. So there's been 72 new tweets on my Twitter feed. I'll start scrolling down. The Grim Grimoire Once More demo is now available in the West today or tomorrow, question mark. Let's see. PDX Interactive had an announcement show earlier today with new games, gameplay reveal. Catch a replay to the show. Well, look at that, because yeah, we knew that Xbox was presenting an announcement show for another company, which, if anything, probably does highlight that they might be closer partners are acquired. I clicked on the Harry Potter Legacy thing and it started playing the audio. I bet you didn't hear it, but yeah. We can show this actually. So there's a video here. It's reading out the description of the bathroom, one of the bathrooms in Harry Potter Hogwarts. And it's just showing the massive amount of visual detail of different types of faucets and such. Now, noticeably here, they are using an image that says J.K. Rowling, which arguably they shouldn't. And then here you've got a magical mermaid painting, which is, I guess, in the book. These are all out of order. Let's click this and see if that fixes things. Let's see. Some YouTuber named Mr. Mac Wright did an in-depth technical review of the iOS edition of Myst, which Cyan Games is thanking him for doing that, which is fair enough. I don't get it. How can Twitter tell me I had 72 new tweets, and then when I scroll down, I'm already seeing repeated ones after about 12 new tweets. Yeah, I will call that confusing. I can't undersing the praises of YouTube uBlock Origin. Yeah, just uBlock Origin. And if you get really, really good at blocking content, you can have an incredibly different experience. Sherlock Holmes The Awakened remake launches April 11th, according to Komatsu. Like, you can just block ads like crazy and have a much better experience on the internet. I have ad blockers already installed on my router to block most ads anyways. But then you can also just drastically change the appearance of websites to make them not have all of the nonsense extra stuff around them. Boil it down to a nice focused appearance that I'm sure people with ADD and ADHD would appreciate having. Of course, it does require a level of technical skill and understanding to figure out how uBlock Origin works, and it takes time. Which arguably, if you're just not spending that much time on the internet, it probably doesn't matter. Well, interesting. We got the login bonus and the Duel Live done by watching that. It must have reset as we were watching it. Login bonus just because we're logged in, obviously. So yeah, there was this presentation where Paradox announcement show happened. Lamplighter League, original game by Harebrained Schemes featuring globe-trotting pulp adventure and strategy turn-based combat set in an alternative 1930s. Have they really not teased this before? This animation style feels somewhat familiar, but I wouldn't be surprised if I've just seen this animation style and all of this is going to be blurred. Anyway, so not showing off the trailers particularly well. Crusader Kings 3, Cities Skylines 2, which I guess the real question is just, does Cities Skylines 2 run a lot better? Is it a full from the ground remake to the experience? Doesn't seem like there's too much more. Surviving the Aftermath, now available. It's just a lot of advertisements being shown here on this Xbox thing. And they're just kind of talking about the same couple of games over and over again. Well, is 3 or 4 announcements enough to have an entire event around? I mean, even looking at this, you'd think there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if not 6 announcements. Some kind of insects. I don't know if that's Crusaders Kings. This is obviously Cities 2. This is Lamplighter. Don't know what that is. How long was this presentation? 30 minutes? Like, there's a couple of games here that are showing that they didn't even bother to mention in the article, or give a screenshot to at least in the article, as far as I can tell, as I'm just skimming it. If anything, this just feels like this is the exact same things that they said they were going to talk about before, and then this really is a case of presenting a bunch of talking heads in almost a more Japanese style of presentations. There you have people kind of dressed down here, just talking, standing at a desk, not sitting at a desk. If anything, this is kind of what I would want, is more people getting on stage talking. Seems to be a large amount of females being presented too, but certainly just having one hostess can help in that aspect a lot. I almost wonder if this is an experiment for Microsoft to have their own presentation style presenter lady instead of having Jeff Keighley from the Game Awards be the presenter, and this might very well be an experiment of trying to figure out if they could make their own kind of event for E3 feel a lot like the Game Awards in quality, while not having to potentially pay Jeff Keighley to show up for an E3 presentation, which, yeah. It also very possibly is an experiment in getting rid of Major Nelson as the presenter. He's probably not going to be in charge of the day-to-day decisions and overall decisions of Xbox going in the near future. I think he's probably going to be promoted either into Microsoft upper management, if not becoming the CEO or president of Microsoft overall, which would be an interesting twist, certainly. But yeah, I bet Major Nelson, just because of his age, is not the figurehead you want to use going forward for Xbox, and bringing out a fresh face presenter lady might work very well. Or we may never see that presenter again, or she may only be for the Pandora presentation. Anything is possible. Obviously not that big of a presentation though, but for talking only about maybe 4 or 5 games, going 30 minutes is way better than the Nintendo Direct, where they barely say anything at the Nintendo Directs and then announce 4 or 5 games in 15 minutes. Alright, well, this has been a longer stream than I would have thought it would have been, considering how few games had come out. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because that helps me with YouTube. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below that'll help get you notifications on top of clicking notification bell. And then if you want to support me further, there's also links to where you can friend me on Steam and get me a gift card or game off my wish list, or you could just support me through Patreon. At this point, the first person to support me on Patreon would literally be the first person, so if you want that distinction, it's available. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.